Coaching Chronicles Season 2, Strixhaven Edition. I'm Alex. This is Nathan. Nathan is back once again. I'm so excited to have you back. Nathan, it's been a while. It's been like a month since we talked.
Yeah, we were just saying before we went on the air, it feels like forever. I mean, honestly, I think, Kaldheim wrapped up. We had a good ending to Season 1, and then, Strixhaven just dropped, and we're jumping right into this.
Yeah, speaking of the end of Season 1, I just want to give, once again, a big thank you to everybody out there who did contribute to our charity goal. We reached it. We surpassed it. That was awesome. It was more than we could have ever expected. And, just huge thank you to the people who contributed. That was, so great.
Yeah, that was really unexpected. It was, when we set the goal, we thought it was high, and it's amazing to exceed it. And I think this time we're going to mix it up and pick something close to my home. So for those of you who don't know, I live in Denver, so I'm going to pick something local here, maybe something related to habitat or animals. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of fires here last summer, and a lot of habitat was lost, and a lot of work went into trying to reseed and bring back some of those areas. Like Rocky Mountain National Park had a lot of fires. So
wow, yeah.
I'm going to do some research and then find a good charity from that front, I think.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm loving, last season was an absolute blast for me. I'm so glad that I get to do this with you. And the fact that this is going to be a good cause, it really, I think that's great as well. All right, Nathan, let's talk Strixhaven. How has the format been treating you?
So I ended Season 1 on a high note, and I thought I really was like, all right, I've hit my stride. And then Strixhaven dropped, and I let it settle for a couple of days. I listened to your podcast. I did some due diligence, hearing about the cards. I don't know the exact number of drafts I've done at this point. I think it's 4 or 5, and I am struggling. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling during the drafts. You see gold cards, like, oh, that's where I should be, or maybe not. I've had a little bit of experience trying to pick the right learning lessons, but I really have no idea what I'm doing there. And so to that point, I think, we've picked 2 drafts today to go through that I had a lot of trouble navigating. I think for this week, we normally do a little bit of gameplay, but candidly, I think for me right now, I just need to focus on the draft. The gameplay I've had, I've gotten run over. I've had long games, everything from, it kind of runs the gamut for me. I'd like to look, improve on this side before we maybe next week jump into some gameplay situations. Yeah,
well, I mean, the good news is that you're not alone. I've heard, from my Twitch chat, from my Twitter, and I take pride in the fact that my Twitch chat is generally actually composed of a lot of really experienced and good players, and even there, people are like, yeah, this format's been killing me. I just haven't been able to find my lane. I don't know why I'm losing, right? There's a lot going on in this set. Just the fact that it's a guild set, the fact that, you got the mystical archives running around, you got lesson learned, a lot of complexity, and of course, if you aren't sure what's going on, you're bound to have a few other people at the table who also don't know what's going on, right? So that even adds to the complexity a bit more. So let's just jump into some drafts, and we'll take a look. All right, Nathan, here we are in our very first pack of Strixhaven. Tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like of this pack. Thoughts, feelings, everything about it.
So, candidly, I'm not a SME or a subject matter expert on the I'm going to keep calling them guilds, but what are they? They're colleges now, right?
Yes.
And so I wasn't sure which direction to go here.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I was trying to choose between 3 cards: the Blade Historian, the Mortality Spear, or Zimone.
Mm-hmm.
I was really worried about the cost for Blade Historian. I think if you're in that color, it's good to go, but outside of that, it's going to be really challenging to cast. Mortality Spear is great. Looks like all around removal. 4 mana, kill anything basically. Or Zimone. Ramp and Quandrix. I landed on Zimone, but I zero confidence in that. Or if there's another card in this pack that I should have been looking at.
Yeah, I love this pack because it actually illustrates a lot of concepts about this format that are unintuitive a little bit, tricky. So let's just go card by card, I think. Let's talk about Blade Historian first. So, very powerful card. Attacking creatures you control have double strike. That's going to end a lot of games. That's going to make things very hard for your opponent. It has a few problems, though. Number one, like you mentioned, it's hybrid, but it's not really hybrid. You really can only play this in, a lower hold, a red-white deck, right? You can't really play this in a different deck. It's just going to be too tough on the mana. And with only being able to play that in Lorehold, that brings up a few challenges. One, I do believe Lorehold is the weakest guild overall. Now, that's not to say that you can't have a good Lorehold deck, but that edges me slightly in the direction of not wanting to take the card. But also, some Lorehold decks aren't all that aggressive, right? So the attacking creatures having double strike, well, that's not, it's good. It's going to be a good card, but not a card that you can maximize on. So that's, a few problems with that card. So we went to Mortality Spear, like you said. Good removal, splashable removal. I find myself in this format splashing quite a bit. There's good colorless fixing. So unlike Blade Historian, this is a card that I can see being played in a Witherbloom deck or in a Quandrix deck splashing it, right? Even in a slower Silver Quill black-white deck splashing the card, right? So it is a fairly flexible card. And I am definitely looking for flexibility in kind of interesting places in this set because it's a guild set. Often we think guild set, gotta lock in, take the gold cards. I guess I'm black-green now if you take Mortality Spear, right? But I do think this is a pretty flexible card as it's super splashable. Let's move on to Zimone now. Now, Zimone is kind of a contentious one. I've been calling her a 2-mana enchantment, basically, because one of the problems, she's got a lot of great abilities, right? Like, ostensibly, you want to be getting to 8 lands in Quandrix, right? She helps you do that. She looks like she helps you do that. The problem with her is that she's super fragile, right? She's this like small body. She doesn't block. She doesn't attack well, and you really can't activate her 4-mana draw card ability until turn 6, 7, 8, 9 when you've really stabilized. And at that point, she's just like kind of an overglorified card draw spell, right? The first ability to put a land onto the battlefield comes up less often than you would think. So I think she's a good card. She's not as flexible as something like Mortality Spear. And I think you would actually prefer your finisher in Quandrix to be something more like a Bookworm or more something like a Fractal Summoning, right? That just makes a huge creature. So she's good, but she's actually not as huge of a pull into Quandrix as you might think. So out of those 3 cards you mentioned, I like Mortality Spear the most. But I do think there are some other options in the pack. Namely, Expanded Anatomy, Guiding Voice, and Prismari Pledge Mage. Now, I just did a ton of talking. Nathan, what do you think of those 3 cards? Were those at all on your radar? It's okay to say no, because I know for a lot of people, they're not going to be.
they weren't. I talked about the 3 cards I was looking at.
Yeah. So, here's the a big picture concept about this format. The guild synergies, the college synergies, don't want to get it wrong, are actually not that strong. If you're playing a Witherbloom deck, there's like the life gain sacrifice stuff. That's all fine and dandy, but it's not like the cards that make those synergies tick. They're not actually that important, right? The Quandrix stuff, all the cards say you want to get to 8 lands, but often when you get to 8 lands, it's like, all right, cool. My 2/2 is a 4/4 now, right? Or my 2/3 is unblockable. It's actually not that strong. The strongest synergies in this set, and the way that you can just reliably have a good deck, is have a lot of learn cards and a lot of lessons. These cards are a lot better than they look. Even Expanded Anatomy looks like, okay, it's like an aura basically. Mm-hmm. But you'd be surprised the number of times that this card, you think, hey, do I have an Expanded Anatomy in my sideboard? Oh man, I do. They're just dead. Or, hey, do I have Expanded Anatomy in my sideboard? It'd be real good if this 3/3 was 5/5 to block, right? And the flexibility of, if you've got a lot of these lessons, being able to get any of them at any time with all your learn cards has just been really, really powerful. So, that being said, with these 2 cards, I don't think I'm taking them here. I would take Mortality Spear. I think it's still a better card, but they're definitely on the radar. And I would take Expanded Anatomy or Guiding Voice over Blade Historian or Zimone, which is not something I would have expected at day 1 of the format, basically.
You also mentioned the Pledge Mage, so that's good in this format?
Yeah, so the Pledge Mage is really important because there's not a lot of good 2-drops in this set. There's really not. Especially in blue-red, you're left with stuff like Burog Befuddler, a lot of them, which is an okay card, but it's not at all exciting. Especially in blue-red, this card and Prismari Apprentice, which is an uncommon, are basically the only 2 good 2-drops. And having good 2-drops is going to be really, really important. So this isn't the flashiest card. It fills a really important role in the format. And, I wouldn't take it over Spear or these cards, but, I think it's in the conversation.
Yeah, I have the very first draft I did this format. We're not going to cover just because it was me just learning the cards.
Right.
And I ended up with a lion's share of 2-drops, but they're all terrible.
Right.
And I was like, wow, the 2-drops are really bad here, or maybe it's me because there's a lot of spell 2-drops as well.
Yes. Yeah. And that's something that's a huge just like format quirk that you need to consider, right? That like any good 2-drop you see that's actually good, bump that up in your pick order a little bit, right? So, you took the Zimone, like you said here. So, I don't actually think it's terrible to take that here. I'll give that one a disagree. But I would have myself taken the Mortality Spear. I just think it's powerful enough and flexible enough. All right, move on to this next pack. What are your thoughts about this one?
So I was kicking myself for not taking the Mortality Spear because having back-to-back Mortality Spears seems like it would be pretty good.
Would it be sweet? Yeah, it would be nice.
Other than that, I was really unsure. I wasn't interested in Village Rites. That just doesn't seem great to me.
Yeah, it's fine.
Expressive Iteration seems like a pretty strong card. You can basically exile a land and play that, and you're up a card there. Mm-hmm. I hadn't had a lot of experience with Lash and Malice, but that seems like somewhat like a dead weightish type removal spell.
Yeah.
And then after that, I really wasn't looking at too much. Rise of Extus seems too high, but I mean, I guess I'm learning from what you just said. Having learned tacked on that's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
And Inkling Summoning, I guess, is something that should have been on my radar. But I landed on the Mortality Spear.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. So I would, again, I would disagree with this one, but I think it's a much, the delta between how good this card and how good the card I would take, which is actually Rise of Extus here, is a lot smaller. So this is, I think when you can cast this card, when you have the fixing or you're in black-green, a slightly better card than Rise of Extus. But Rise of Extus is actually one of the premier commons in the format. It does look expensive, right? And it is pretty expensive, but getting rid of anything for 6 mana and then going to get another card from your sideboard, that's super, super powerful. And this format isn't super fast, where you can't spend 6 mana to kill something. It's going to be a castable card. So I would disagree with this one, but again, not to a high degree. The card I'm also interested in, like you pointed out, is Inkling Summoning. I think that would be my next pick after Mortality Spear. Let's keep on keeping on. What about this next pack? We've got a black-green card, a blue-green card, and, well, we don't see very many good black-green or blue-green cards here.
Well, so I guess you kind of tipped me off on that. So I was actually looking at the Blood Researcher,
right?
But I was trying to stay open and read the table. It seems like there's a lot of more blue and red here than anything. So I was interested also in Heated Debate and also the Maelstrom Muse. And I didn't want to get married to my first pick, so I landed on the Muse.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable. So I would also disagree with this one, and this is it's so close because I almost don't want to give you a disagree, but if we're keeping it gotta
be honest.
Yeah, I gotta keep some tough love. I would probably take the Burian Books here. Burian Books is just been like the breakout instant of the format. It is much better than cards like this in the past have been. The fact that sometimes it's reduced by 2 mana is huge. The fact that you put it 2 from the top instead of on top is also huge. They have, imagine this, right? They have a good 4-drop, right? You Burian Books it for 3 mana, you put it 2 from the top. Maybe on turn 6, when they redraw it, that 4-drop may not be as important anymore. So a lot of the time, you actually, it's actually better than a hard removal spell because it makes them redraw a card they might not want to redraw a little bit later, right? Maelstrom Muse is very powerful, and if you're in a deck that can wants to cast these powerful spells, yeah, that card's great. But it is just a little bit less flexible, and I guess the tiebreaker here is that Burian Books is close to as powerful, but more flexible, basically, is what I would say about it. And then, of course, there's Heated Debate, which you can't go wrong with Heated Debate too, but I do think Burian Books is a little bit better than Heated Debate, and that might be unintuitive if you're looking at the cards, because this one definitely looks a lot worse than Heated Debate, I would say.
Yeah, I honestly, at this point in the format, was not even... there's so much text on the cards, I didn't even really register the 2 mana discount. Like 3 mana sounds like a good deal there, now that we're talking it through, but...
Yeah. You tend to also when when you're looking at cards from a new set for the first time, you tend to read a card and you're like, oh, okay, I've seen these kind of cards before. I kind of know what they do,
Yeah.
to put them on top kind of things, and you kind of shortcut them to like, I've heard this story before, but it's tricky when those ones sneak up on you that are a little bit better than they look. And I think this set is full of those cards actually, which is making it tricky to navigate if it's your first few times to the draft. That there's a lot of cards that read a lot worse than they actually are. So I would disagree with this, like I said, but Maelstrom Muse is definitely a pretty nice one. All right.
As is tradition, I'm disagree. So let's see what we can do here.
Yeah, what about this one?
Honestly, no idea. I have a blue-green, a blue-red, and a black-green. The common... I was looking at the Spectacle Mage, a 2/2 flyer for 3 that reduces cost, seemed solid.
Mm-hmm.
The Tome Shredder seemed kind of neat. And same with the Kelpie Guide, it kind of goes with Zimone trying to get to that 8 lands. So I landed on the Kelpie Guide, but as you can see, I was looking at the Spectacle Mage as well. As an aside, that Spectacle Mage is probably my favorite art in the set. It's just
it's
gorgeous.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's real nice. I actually, a lot of the art in this set's actually pretty striking, especially the Mystical Archives. I really like them.
Yeah.
Another card with super nice art that I actually would take out of this pack, and I think this is the first, mistake, because it's so important, is Environmental Sciences here. So Environmental Sciences does not look very exciting, right? It's like, all right, 2 mana blessing, go get a land. But the fact that if you're drafting learn cards at an appropriate rate, which means, taking them pretty early, you want to end up like 5-4, 5, 6, 7 of them in your deck at the end of the draft. The fact that on all of your learn cards, they could say, I can go get a land with this, is very powerful, even if you're not splashing. And sometimes you are splashing, which makes it even better. If you're just a 2-color deck, you're still really going to want Environmental Sciences. And this is actually my take for the best common in the set. Full stop.
Wow.
Yeah, I am okay first picking this card, which, again, super unintuitive. I was, full disclosure here, I wasn't doing super well in the first day or two of this format. But then I realized, this card is just so important. And to expand on that, the lesson and learn cards are just so important. I should be prioritizing those over almost everything, right? Once I started doing that, it was much easier to win. So this is my first disagree here for this draft. I like Kelpie Guide quite a lot. I like this Pledge Mage and Spectacle Mage. But again, science is just too important.
If Environmental Sciences weren't here, what would you have taken?
Yeah, good question. So you've got Zimone, you've got Mortality Spear, you've got the Muse. I think I probably would have taken the Pledge Mage. It's not as flexible as the Kelpie Guide because you don't really want to be casting this in your blue-green deck. It's a little tough on blue-blue on turn 2. But again, like what I was saying about the Pledge Mage earlier, it's just super important to lock in the good 2s when you can.
Yeah, it's kind of like Moat Piranhas, right? It's basically just a 2-mana 3/3.
Yeah, it looks like Moat Piranhas, but the fact that it can attack sometimes, I don't know how much M21 you played, but it's a little bit more like Drowsing Pteranodon, I would say.
Yeah,
than Moat
I
Piranhas.
played a good bit of that.
Yeah, where it's like it looks, the same analogy I think was made, where it's like, oh, this is just the Moat Piranhas, right? But no, the fact that on those type of cards that they can attack some percentage of the time, that's pretty big. All right, what about this one here? We got a pretty nice one.
This is where I can put my foot in my mouth. I thought this was a pretty straightforward pack, so I landed on the Cultivator. I didn't even really consider anything else.
Well, you know what? I actually agree with this one. Cultivator is gas. This card is great. I was saying how the guild or the college synergies aren't as impactful, aren't as important as you might think, or as I thought going in. But all that being said, you don't need the college synergies to be all that good for this card to be fantastic. This card is such a good body in the format. It ramps you. Sometimes you cast it on turn 5, and because the land comes in untapped, you can play another card because you can go play it, land comes in untapped, play my land drop, play a 2-drop, right? Yeah. This is just one of the best uncommons in the set, I would say. So I'm very happy to take that here. And yeah, there's a lesson in this pack. I was just going on about how much I like lessons, but this is one of the less impressive ones, the Spirit Summoning. Still good, but I'll be taking the powerful uncommon. Thank you very much. So agree on that one. All right.
Just looking at what we've drafted already, I think this is what I've been struggling with. It's like, what colors am I really going towards? Like green,
Yeah.
blue, red, like blue, red, splash green, green, blue, splash red. Like, so there's a lot to think about here.
You know what really helps there when you're not sure? Environmental sciences, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
okay.
you just get to play it all, right?
That might be the big takeaway from today. Lesson learned in environmental sciences, huh?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a tension in the format, because you could take a bunch of like monocolored cards and be a little bit more open, but you're missing out on the gold powerful cards if you don't take those early, right? I think that is another place where people are struggling a bit. It's like, if I take these blue-red cards and black-greens open, what do I do, right? And I've just found, generally, I like what you've done so far. I've disagreed with a lot of the picks, but I like the general direction, or the general, idea of the picks you've made, which is like, just take the powerful cards, You'll work it out later, and I think that's a perfectly valid strategy, especially when you get to pick like 8, 9, especially on the wheel, when you can really see, okay, this guild is probably open. I've been saying learn lesson is the most important thing, but at the same time, it is pretty important to find your 2-color lanes still. That's still a relevant thing. So my take has just been take the powerful cards, even if they don't go together, and then figure it out later. All right.
So this pack, honestly, Expel was probably what I think is the best card here, just as, my evaluation at this time or currently. But it's so far from what we were at. I landed on the Zephyr Boots. I was... you can see I was looking at the Masterpiece, but for 7 mana, I was a little unsure of that.
Yeah, so I actually quite like the Masterpiece. The Masterpiece it would be my pick out of this pack, by the way. So I would say this is a mistake, because I think this card is actually pretty good. It is expensive, but the nice thing is you've already got the Maelstrom Muse in your pile. There's the Spectacle Mage, which reduces it to 6. Sometimes you can cast this on turn 5 if you attack with Maelstrom Muse, and so. Yes, it looks a little bit expensive, but it stabilizes you super, super well, right? Just like 2 4/4s in the ground. That's pretty darn big in the set, and then it can turn the corner and stop. You can just like start beating down with it. This card's actually pretty good. One of the better commons, and I've been really impressed with it myself. So I would take that here. A note on Expel, and we'll talk about Zephyr Boots too. Expel is, it's just a little bit clunky, basically, where your white decks in this format, even though there's the whole slow controlling lore hold stuff, your white decks in this format still are pretty aggressive most of the time, and so they don't really want this card. It's a little bit awkward, a little bit clunky. They want to get blockers out of the way, right? So I don't love this card. I don't end up playing it very often. Zephyr Boots is a weird one, because it doesn't really fit in anywhere. It's not a bad card by any means, but I'm never excited about it anywhere. It can be okay in a black-white aggressive deck. It can be okay in a a blue-green deck with a bunch of giant monsters to get through, but it never fills a role. Really, the role I guess it would fill is a finisher if you're low on finishers, basically. But I don't think you need to worry about that at the moment, right? Especially because you have a few finishers in the pile already with the Zimone and the Kelpie guy is a good late game card. Yeah, so I would take the Masterpiece there, but we'll move on. What do you like in this pack?
Frost Trickster I was looking at. Serpentine Curve, I feel like that's more a blue-red card, but I'm not certain on that one. I'd like to get your feedback on that, or the lesson for the summoning, and I landed on the summoning.
Yeah, I agree with that. I been talking them up the whole time. I can't go back on my word now. Summoning is really quite good. This is one of the better summonings too. Just 4/4 is beefy. I like Frost Trickster too. It's been a bit of an underperformer just because the blue decks aren't super aggressive. And so what happens is you tap their thing down for a turn. Okay, you gain a little bit of life virtually, but then it's not a huge impactful spell after that. Serpentine Curve has actually been really impressive for me. Way better than I thought it would be. Where I agree, it is a little bit more of a blue-red card than a blue-green card. But even in blue-green, if you're prioritizing the lesson learned kind of cards and synergies, this card becomes a 5/5, a 6/6, a 7/7 way more often than you might think. So while I would definitely agree with this pick, take Elemental Summoning, I'd actually take the Serpentine Curve next after that. All right, thoughts on this next pack?
So I was looking at... yeah, I made that quick. I made that pick quickly. There we go. So I was looking at Wormhole Serpent and Pop Quiz and ended up landing on Wormhole Serpent. I thought making something unblockable seemed like a good deal. I'm guessing that's going to be a mistake at this point. I didn't even consider the summoning there because I just had picked one up.
Yeah, I would, it's good that we're taking in that, yes, my Alex's instincts say take the summoning, because I think you can't go wrong with the second, even the third one. Wormhole Serpent's fine. It's okay. But it's just like it's a fine body, but I don't find myself activating the ability all that often. It can be a problem some games, but it's nothing that usurps the power level of a good lesson, basically. My pick order for this pack would be Summoning, Pop Quiz, and then Serpent, I think.
So this was a mistake, right?
Yeah, I give this one a mistake.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next pick here. Thoughts on this pack? This is our wheel.
This is the wheel. I just basically took the befuddler. I was like, it's in the color. I probably can play it if I'm blue-red or blue-green.
Yeah.
You can see me reading and looking at some of these other cards just to make sure, but I landed on the befuddler.
Yeah, so I would call this a mistake too. Expanded Anatomy, I really want the first copy. In black-white, the most aggressive deck in the format, you definitely want this card, but even in any other color pair, there's going to be spots where it's good. And again, just that flexibility of being able to get this as an option on all your learn cards is really, really powerful. So I'd take the Expanded Anatomy here.
Chose the wrong frog card there, huh?
Yeah, exactly. All right, and then we get to this one.
I just picked the 2-drop. I didn't want to pick a 5-drop, and my curve was looking a little wonky, so I grabbed the Blood H General.
Yeah, this is not a very good 2-drop in general. I agree. I'd probably take that. I might just take a land almost, honestly, because there's a chance this makes my deck somehow. But I can totally buy taking the Blood H General. It's not. This is what I was talking about, where it's like this is your 2-drop you have to work with a lot of the time, right? It's like, ugh, there's not that many spirits there's no spirits in like red blue. It's a red white thing, right? So sometimes you just have to play 2-mana 2/2 though, and you have to suck it up. So I agree with it, even though it's sad.
Well, I need all the agrees I can get at this point.
Yeah. All right, and rounding out the pack here.
I took the lesson. I took the introduction to Annihilation.
Agree. I want to point out Reject here. As a card, I think people they like it appeals to them for some reason. I think they're like, ooh, 2-mana counterspell, like that's cool. But I've just found it to be not very good, basically. Like, it's an okay sideboard card if you're playing best of 3. Counter a Bookworm or something. That's kind of nice. Or, like, bring it in on the draw when you're on the draw against an aggro deck, counter their 2-drop. But it's not a card I really want to main deck. So, yeah. Totally agree.
I'm not a big fan of those ones that are conditional, like if they can just pay their way out of it.
Right. I think it's generally just a worse Essence Scatter. And Essence Scatter is good. It's a good card, but, nothing too exciting. All right, Spectacle Mage Wheels. That's great.
Yep.
Agree with that.
Snag
There's
that.
the land in the pack too as well. And this is actually, definitely agree with this pick. But this is reinforcing a lot of things that we might have thought to be true about this draft. We got those late elemental summonings. We got like a 3rd pick Maelstrom Muse, which isn't like too telling, but it's something. And really, I'm looking at the wheel in these packs to figure out what of the colleges is open, right? If we just go back real quick to where we originally saw the Spectacle Mage here. There was a Tome Shredder in this pack. There was a Prismari Pledge Mage. So it's not like, oh, it's wide open, but all these cards wheeled. But the fact that, this wheeled it all out of a pack, somebody took some kind of medium cards over this, that's still good news, especially because Prismari is one of the colleges that I do think can support 2 or 3 drafters. So this is still a good sign for you, even if it means you're not the only drafter at the table, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. Prismari Campus, that's a great wheel for you. Agree with that.
Took.
Yeah, and Resculpt, sure. I think it's pretty irrelevant, but
yeah, we're gonna put those as irrelevant. I don't get the credits for them.
Our last pick here, Revitalize. Yeah, totally reasonable too. All right, here's our next pack here. Thoughts on this next pack?
Well, I know what you're going to say. There's an environmental sciences here, but I for my colors, this pack was kind of crappy, and I took the Masterpiece, the Elemental Masterpiece.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, honestly. So, as a card evaluation standpoint, compared to the rest of the cards in the pack, obviously now you know how great or highly I value my mental sciences. But if you take it out of the equation as like a card that you would even consider looking at, I do think Elemental Masterpiece is certainly the best card for you here. Now, obviously, this is a mistake still, but as far as like honing in on a card you should take, it's not like you took Mascot Interception. It's not like you took Reconstruct History as a weird splash or something like that. So you're at least on track there. So
yeah, I mean, I couldn't miss on that one. In terms of...
All right, we move on to this one.
I actually wasn't really sure on this one. I was trying to choose between Curate, Pop Quiz, and Tezzeret's Gambit, and I figured you get a little less experience with the rarer cards, so I took Tezzeret's Gambit. 3 mana and 2 life to draw 2 cards and proliferate if I have counter seemed like a good deal.
It's kind of funny because you said something very important there, or you said you don't get to play with these cards as often. It's good to try them out. I'm not even going to give you a disagree with this one because I actually think I wouldn't take them. But at the same time, I think that it is very good to try this out here. Even if these aren't, this isn't maybe the absolute best card in the pack. And I think it's arguable, it could be even. I would be taking Arcane Subtraction or Pop Quiz. But I think it is really important, and this is almost like a soapboxy thing that I'm gonna force the agree on you here, that I think it is a good pick that you took this card here, right? I would take the Arcane Subtraction, but I think it is great for you as the drafter in this moment to take the Tezzeret's Gambit. And on top of that, it's not that far off of Arcane Subtraction. It is still a very good card.
Yeah. I figured they're all kind of card draw spells, right?
Exactly.
So I was like...
Yeah. I think Arcane Subtraction is a little bit better than Pop Quiz just because it's cheaper, affects the board, affects the combat or something. Especially if you have some larger creatures, you can maybe eat something in combat. I actually do like Curate a little more than you might think. This card kind of looks like, it's kind of filler, it's kind of air, but I've been really happy with it. Just getting getting that card selection, getting a card in the graveyard, or a spell in the graveyard for cards that care about that, like Tome Shredder and Serpentine Curve. So this is actually been a card I've been pretty impressed with. But I do buy the Tezzeret's Gambit for sure here.
I mean, just to close the loop on that, I did draw it a few times and get to cast it.
Yeah.
The fact that it's not an instant, and the times I did have to cast it, I was lower on land, so I did have to pay the life. It was a real downside, to be honest. I think I would have been happier with one of the other cards.
Well, it's interesting because you said that it's a downside to have to pay the life, but that's almost an upside, right? You still have the option, right? It might have sucked at the point where you're like, okay, I have to pay the 2 life, but that's better than not casting it at all, right? So
yeah, I guess just the way I was thinking about it is it's 3 mana if you pay the life, right?
Right.
And you draw 2 cards, and the proliferate's not really that applicable. Whereas Pop Quiz is also 3 mana. You draw a card and pick a lesson. It's basically 2 draw cards, and it's instant.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree on all fronts there.
If I had that pick again, I would pick one. I'd probably pick Pop Quiz. But even though you said the -4, I would look at that one now. But if me without talking to you came back into this, the Pop Quiz would have been the pick.
Right.
Here I landed on Heated Debate. I just want a removal.
Yeah, I think that's what I would take too. Increasing Vengeance is actually a pretty interesting one, where it looks like a card where you're like, oh, that's like too finicky. I don't really want to play that card, right? But the common version of this card that's in this set, the Teach by Example, right? That card's actually been a card that I've been pretty impressed with. It's like the next instance of sorcery you cast, you get to copy, and being able to on turn 8 or on turn 7, which you do get to in this format, copying a Heated Debate or copying a cheap learn spell twice. That's pretty impactful, right? When you get to flash it back. So I agree with the Heated Debate here, but this card's also on my radar.
Yeah, it just seemed. I agree. The read seemed too finicky.
Yeah. All right, moving on here. Move on to this.
You can see me checking my deck. Like, what's my curve looking like?
That's great. You love. Yeah, you got to do it.
Lesson learned from a previous season. I wasn't impressed with anything here other than the fractal summoning, so I just took that. It seems like a good card.
Yep, totally agree. Other cards in this pack I like the Pillar Drop Warden. This card, it blocks super well. It gets back one of your important spells, especially if you have a few of the big Prismari spells that you want to cast, multiple times. And, it's kind of funny. I mentioned in the previous pack, hey, maybe this Lorehold Campus is going to be a card we might want. Obviously you're taking Fractal Summoning here, and you would probably take Pillar Drop Warden if it wasn't. But if neither of those cards were here, I think Rip Apart is actually kind of in consideration, because like that could be a little bit of a cheeky splash, especially if you do have an Environmental Sirens in there with the dual land. Like, I've been in general okay with splashing a decent card if I have a dual land plus an Environmental Sciences, because one of the things to consider is that if you have Environmental Sciences in your sideboard, every learn card counts as a source, right? So you can have like 6 white sources in your deck pretty easily and just be able to cast, a decent card like this if you wanted to.
And Rip Apart's a good card in this format. I have 0 experience with it.
It's good. It's not great. This is more if there was nothing else in the pack, I could play this and maybe splash it if I wanted to. Sorcery speed DL3 is decent. Getting to blow up an artifact or enchantment comes up sometimes. There's actually not a ton of them in the format. Like, seeing as a lot of the design space is taken up by instants and sorceries, they actually don't have a lot of, there's no blue enchantment-based removal spell like we usually see. There's no pacifism or anything. But there are a few pretty obnoxious rares that are enchantments or artifacts, so getting to, nug those off sometimes is pretty nice. So I would splash it if I did have the dual land, but, of course, like I said, Fractal Summoning is the easy pick for me here.
Yeah, and one thing to point out, you can see Zamone and the other green cards have made it. I pulled them out of my deck on there on the right. At this point, I was thinking I was Prismari. Yeah,
and I think that's totally right. I think you especially because the signals you have been getting, there's no reason to play the green cards, I don't think. Oh, except, you could end up in a spot where you wanted to play a few green cards if you had the fixing, right? I think that's one of the great parts about this format. I think almost there are few truly right answers, especially this early when it's hard to know the exact right thing to do, right? You could splash a few green cards. I've been splashing a few off-color cards here and there when I have that fixing. So I could see a world where you splash the Quandrix Cultivator, maybe the Zamone. Maybe you felt like at the end of the draft, hey, my deck needs a little bit more power, right? So I think it's good that you narrowed it down to, let's just be blue-green or blue-red. But, I think the green could come in at some point. All right, let's move on to this next one. Thoughts on this one?
No idea. I went with the Team Pennant. Nothing else really was talking to me, so that's where I landed.
Yeah. Team Pennant's all right. I find it is actually pretty good in blue-red. Kind of funny enough. You'd think it belongs a low-to-the-ground aggro deck maybe, but in blue-red, you've got the big tokens. You've got the biggest tokens of them all. The biggest mascot tokens are the 4/4s. So equipping that, making a 5/5 Vigilance Trample, that's actually pretty nice. So while I would disagree with this, I would actually take the Spirit Summoning here. Okay. I think Team Pennant is actually a reasonable card. So I disagree, but not by a whole lot. All right, moving on here. Really only one reasonable card to take, and that's Curate.
Yeah, I took the Curate, yeah.
Happy with Curate.
What were your thoughts on maybe the Leyline Invocation there? Like, if you might do the splash.
Yeah, interesting. I think Leyline Invocation is okay. It's nice because it's a creature that's also a spell. I wouldn't splash it unless I was in this odd position where I had a bunch of spells and very few finishers, right? And I think with your Wormhole Serpent, your Elemental Masterpiece, you're probably not going to be in that position. One more good card, and you'll one more good top end card, you'll probably be fine. But I can see a world where that happens. So yeah, Curate for me here. Agree with that. And moving on to this pick. Thoughts on this pick?
Again, going with the same logic as before. You don't get to try rares all that often. None of the other ones seemed anywhere in the ballpark, so I took the Culmination of Studies. I don't know if it's particularly good or not.
Yeah, it's not. Spoiler, okay. It's not very good. So if you just go through the thinking about what X has to be to get something meaningful out of it. Let's say X is 5, right? And let's say you're lucky, you hit 2 gold cards and a blue card and 2 lands, right? So you paid 7 mana to draw 3 cards, make 2 treasures, and deal a few points of damage to the opponent. Not a great deal, really, right? It gets a little bit better if you get, X equals, 6 or 7 or 8 or something.
Yeah, but if you're casting an 11 mana spell.
So if you're looking for a big spell, I would take the Explosive Welcome, which is a pretty reasonable card. I think it is the worst of the big Prismari spells. Well, I mean, aside from Culminations to Study, I think that's the worst one. But it's still a fine card. It's still a fine card if you want something, a good big spell to cast when you have multiple, some Spectacle Mages and some Maelstrom uses. I think these spells in general, Explosive Welcome, Creative Outburst, and the Masterpiece, they look very intimidating, very daunting. You're like, how am I ever going to cast that, right? But the cards are generally set up in a way that they're designed pretty well, where you do cast these in a good number of your games, right? It doesn't take too much, one Spectacle Mage, one Maelstrom Muse to get this in easily castable range. So I would say this is a mistake. I would take the Explosive Welcome here. Moving on. Get to this pack. Thoughts on this pack?
I just went with the Snow Day.
I actually like Snow Day. Snow Day is
it seems good.
Yeah, Snow Day's quite good. I've been impressed with this card. I agree with this pick. It is nice because your opponent has like a 4/4 and a 3/3 that's attacking you. Maybe you have only one good blocker and you're like, well, let's just Snow Day for a turn. That really buys you a lot of time. And where normally we see these cards where they're like tap 2 things down, you generally don't want to play them in your controlling decks because it's just like card disadvantage. Getting to draw 2 cards and discard a card makes that a whole lot better, right? Sometimes you can cast this for 5 off of your Spectacle Mage being on the battlefield. I keep saying Spectacle Mage. Maybe that's a hint that this card is very good. I like Spectacle Mage quite a bit. Spoiler alert, but I found this to be a good top end spell. And the nice thing is, you don't even need a cost reducer like you would for the Explosive Welcome. You can just cast this on 6 lands pretty reasonably. So yeah, agree on this pick. Totally. All right, moving on. Rounding out the pack here. Back to work. Here's our wheel.
I mean, for me, the choices are Resculpt, which I think is not good, or the Cogworker Archivist, and I took the Cogwork.
Yeah, I think this pick doesn't matter too much. Yeah, take that. Maybe you just want a top end card. I think you're fine on top end cards, but there's nothing else in that pack you really care about.
We'll mark that one as irrelevant.
Yeah, let's mark that one as relevant. This one?
Arcane Subtraction over Pop Quiz on the wheel, by the way.
Yeah, I like it. There's also Introduction to Prophecy, which is probably the worst lesson. It's just clunky. You rarely get it. I find it myself rarely getting hit. It's almost like the lesson where it's like, if you didn't pick up other lessons, all right, here you go. You get something. So you're not just getting nothing from your sideboard. So yeah, I do agree with taking the Arcane Subtraction. I like that a lot. We take I
think irrelevant, right?
Yeah, irrelevant. It's kind of funny. I have Splash Study Break in some of my blue-red deck. Now,
I thought you were going to say you splashed Dragon's Approach.
No. that's a Magical Christmas Land. Maybe one day by the end of the format I'll play.
You just have like 10 copies of it.
Yeah, exactly. But this just shows how important Lesson Learn is to me. If I am low on Learn and I prioritize Lesson, I'll splash these off-color Learn cards because it's so important to have those synergies in my deck for me. So I think you're not in a position. Is this irrelevant
or is it a mistake?
I would say it's a disagree because I don't think you're in a position to need to splash it, but at the same time, like Dragon's Approach is like never going to be a card, like it's never going to be a card that you actually want. So I would give it a disagree. Moving on, take Divine Gambit.
I almost took it. I think I took the wall because like the Gambit's definitely not going to be played. I almost took it just for the wild card purposes. But I took the wall.
Yeah, I actually have been playing wall more often than I thought. Again, there's not good 2-drops. This is an okay defensive body, and sometimes you want stuff to fuel your Graveyard Matter stuff in blue-red. So, yep, I actually agree with that quite a bit. Take Enthusiastic Study. That's a nice wheel for you. That's pretty nice. You get a nice Learn card there. We take Pest Summoning, the Containment Breach, irrelevant, I would say, and last pick here.
So that lesson itself is not particularly good?
It's good, actually. No. I take it back. It's not irrelevant, because if you pick up a blue-green campus, you would probably just play that and stick this in your sideboard, right? Because the opportunity cost is pretty low. So yeah, I actually take it back. That's not irrelevant. That's a fine pickup for you, right? The nice thing about
I'll put myself down as irrelevant for that, though. It's not like I'm going to choose the black-white one.
Of course, but for the purposes of like conversation about the card, all of the lesson cards, the great thing is the only opportunity cost of them is where you take them in the draft, right? So if you're getting this card for literal free, that's great, especially if some percentage of the time you're going to want to cast it. So it's actually a decent pickup if you pick up, randomly pick up a blue-green tap land. And then, we end up this pack.
But what if you open the blue-red Planeswalker?
Exactly, right? All right, we get approach.
Look, I opened the blue-red Planeswalker. Yeah.
A little bit of foreshadowing there. All right, so we open Rowan Noel. Not a bad pickup.
So obviously that's where I landed.
That's a slam dunk. Yeah. Actually, you know what, Nathan? I kind of disagree. I'm telling you, these lesson cards are so fun. No, obviously
grab the spirit submarine.
Yeah. No, obviously you're gonna take the sick Planeswalker. You definitely cast Will. Just a note on this. You definitely cast Will more often than Rowan. But if you have a hand that can protect Rowan, like you have a few removal spells and you're on the play, you kind of want to run her out on turn 3 a lot of the time because it's like, hey, this is gonna ultimate in 2 turns. If you don't kill this. Yeah, I get this awesome emblem, right? So I'd say 90% of the time you play Will, but do weigh the times that you want to cast Rowan.
I mean, again, we're not going to do gameplay today, but I want to point out a mistake that I made with Will there. They had created a fractal, fractal, and I tried to nerf it by making it an O2, and instead I just made it too higher toughness.
You made it bigger,
yeah. I had this great plan. I forget. I think. I don't remember the numbers, but I think it was a 5/5. I attacked my 3/3 into it, lost my 3/3, and then I was like, all right, now I'm going to make it 2 toughness, and it's going to die. And that did not work out well for me.
That way.
No.
Yep. No.
So
sad times.
Just sharing my punt of the week there.
All right, we move on to our next pack here.
So, at this point, I was pretty confident that I wasn't going to be blue-green. And, as you can tell, I haven't been really prioritizing the lessons. So, I went with the Kelpie again.
Yeah, you know what? At this point, I almost think I agree here. It pains me to pass an elemental summoning. I love that card so much. It's very good. But I do think you need a few more cheap things. Right, and you have a few expensive things in there too, where you actually don't mind the Kelpie Guide as another ramp tool, just to ramp out, a Wormhole Serpent on turn 4, or casting the Masterpiece at turn early. So where I am, internally debating with myself, I'm on the fence here of what I wanted to take. If you took Kelpie Guide, I actually would agree with you here. I think that's a good enough card, and that the Elemental Summoning would be definitely a close pick, but I don't disagree with the Kelpie Guide here.
All right, good. Yeah, that's why you. Just. Going back to previous season, that's why you could see me looking at my curve, right?
Right.
Saying like, where am I? What am I looking at?
Lesson learned.
So again, get past a nice blue-red spell here, in my opinion. I mean, maybe it's not very good, but I didn't get a chance to cast it at all. But I took the Torrent Sculptor here.
Yeah, this card's reasonable. It's a nice little flexible card, a removal spell or a decent sized body. Not a bomb rare or anything, but it's definitely the best card for you here. So yeah, I agree on that. And again, little bump because it's a rare. You want to try that out, of course.
Yep.
So definitely agree on that. Move on to the next pack.
Didn't get a chance to do any punts with that, so that's good.
Move on to this one.
I was worried about my curve, so I took the Soothsayer Adept.
Yeah, and this is where it's tough, right? Because agree. Like it's good to be worried about your curve, and I think maybe you do just have to take that over much better cards like Pillar Drop Warden and Fractal Summoning. But if to be fair to you, it's not like we saw a lot of the great 2-drops and you passed on them throughout this entire draft or anything. But this just shows where it's like Soothsayer's not a great card. You really don't want to be playing this card. Just like the body's a little small, the ability is a little bit clunky, and so. Yeah, I agree with your pick there, especially because you do have a pretty sizable lesson board currently. But I'm not super happy about it. Definitely a necessary evil, but I do agree.
It just, in this format in general, are 2-drops as important, or is the format a little slower? I asked because I've had drafts, like I mentioned, where the games went really long, but this particular deck, I faced 3 aggro opponents that got really wrecked.
Right. I would say definitely less important than in something like Call Time, Zendikar, M21. Recent sets we've had, they're still important. You definitely still want them, but I don't just feel like I'm dead on turn 2 if I don't play one. A lot the way that the decks in this format operate a lot of the time, whether it be the Silverquill decks, the Prismari decks, Quandrix decks, whatever it is, they tend to if you give them the chance to snowball, they can take over the game, right? The Silver Quill deck goes unopposed on blocks for a few turns. Then they just have like these pump spells and these flyers, and you can never come back, right? And the Prismari deck gets to like cast their flyer, and you're not pressuring them. You know, their Spectacle Mage, and you're not pressuring them. And they get to like cast their giant spell, and you're like, okay, well, I didn't do anything on turn 2, turn 3. They just ran away with the game. But at the same time, you want to be doing those big things as well too, right? So you don't want to have a million 2-drops. You don't want to have 8 2-drops in your deck, right? Unless they're super high quality ones, like the Prismari Pledge Mage or the Apprentice Cycle, the uncommons, stuff like that, right? So I want to lock in, 3 or 4 2-drops if I can, 3 or 4 good ones, but I don't feel the need to like load up on them. You're gonna face those aggressive starts, like you said, but they're not gonna happen every single match.
Got it.
All right, so agree on that one. Move on. Thoughts on this pick? The ever looming environmental sciences.
I was looking at the Frost Trickster. I mean, obviously I did a drag over there, but I do think I ended up on the Pillar Drop Warden.
Okay. Thoughts on that?
I was looking at the curve. It seemed like a good blocker. 1/5 reach. It can get back some of the spells I've already cast. I'm trying to get some blockers down for that Planeswalker that I have.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, no, so I disagree, obviously, because I'm going to tell you to take environmental sciences, but I actually would, in your spot, take Pillar Drop Warden over Trickster, right? Where I think that a lot of people right now in the format would just take Trickster as like, oh yeah, that's definitely the better card. But I totally agree with what you're saying. You want to block, you want to get back some of these big spells. I think that this is a pretty underrated card right now, and I think Trickster is a little bit of an overrated card. So I totally buy your logic, and yeah, I like the pick.
Now, is it a disagree or a mistake?
Sorry, say again?
Disagree or mistake?
I'll give you a mistake just because it's environmental sciences.
All right,
if it was another lesson, I could let it slide, but
all right.
Yeah. All right, we move on to this pick.
I hadn't. So I took the sideboard summoning.
Yep. Agreed.
Lesson, but in retrospect now, looking at it with fresh eyes, Aether Helix is pretty strong in my opinion. What are your thoughts on it? Is it worth splashing or no?
It's a little bit clunky. I wouldn't splash it. I would almost always play it in a blue-green deck. I don't think I would splash it, especially when you have not many tools to splash the card here. It's a little bit awkward for a few reasons. One, it's 5 mana for this effect is a little bit clunky. It's not too bad. You always have to have something in your graveyard you can get back to actually cast the card. You actually can't just go bounce to permanent, right? That's a little bit awkward. It is really nice when your opponent goes turn 4 elemental summoning, you go bounce that, get back my good 3-drop. That's a really great turn. So there's spots where it can be good, but I don't think I would generally consider splashing it here. So I agree with your elemental summoning pick. All right, moving on.
Worried about 2-drops, so I took the general. I guess I'm undervaluing Burying Books or Expanded Anatomy here.
Yeah, I would take the Burying Books. I think that card is phenomenal. You can actually make up for the lack of having 2-drops with Burying Books, because if you can Burying Books their their turn 3 attacker or their turn 4 attacker, that's pretty good too, right? So yeah, it does a similar, it fills a similar role as Blaze General. If you're given the chance, given the choice between Bury and a good 2-drop, like not a crappy one like this one, I think you still take the 2-drop. But I'm very happy with Bury here as a way to stymie early aggression.
Mistake.
So, yeah, I would give that one a mistake. All right, moving on.
Pigment Storm. That's what I landed on.
Yep, you already have an Intro to Annihilation. You don't really want 2 of them, so
you can see me checking there. I was like,
do I have that one yet? Have I checked that one off? All right, this pick?
I really didn't know. I had already picked up the Spirit Summoning. I felt like I already had a pretty big lesson board. I'm not that experienced with Test of Talents, so I went with the body. I went with the 4/3.
I would take Test of Talents here, so I think this is a mistake. I'm pretty happy with the negate effect in this format, just because there's everybody's casting a million spells, just a very high density of instants and sorceries in people's decks. And this one is a little bit higher upside than your average negate, just because getting to see their hand is actually pretty valuable. And getting to see their deck if it's best of 3. Not even if it's best of 3, even best of 1. getting to see their hand or their deck is pretty valuable because you can know their potential draws, the outs they have for certain situations, the top decks they could have. You go, okay, well, I know I maybe should play around this combat trick or something, right? So I've been pretty happy with a copy of this card in my deck, and I don't think you need the body. Like, one of the things to adjust for in this format, especially because if you just look at your creature count, if you brought up your creature count in this deck, I think you have maybe like 9 creatures right now, maybe 10, right? Which is not a lot for a normal deck. But you have to consider that all of your lesson cards are creatures too. So you're going to have access to those. So really, you have like 15, 16 creatures, which is a lot more than it looks like, right? Yeah, so I would say that's a mistake. Moving on, get to our wheel pack.
So this is... I actually had logic for this pick. I didn't want another... Pigment Storm. I had seen a lot of the blue-green campuses go around, and I knew I had some green cards in my sideboard, so I took the Archway Commons just in case those blue-greens came back.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's sound logic. If you wheel like the Cultivator or something, right? Maybe you play both Cultivators in this deck. I agree. You don't want Pigment Storm here. You don't want another copy of a clunky removal spell. I actually agree with this pick. I like the logic. I actually like Pigment Storm quite a bit. But when you already have, you've got a Heated Debate, you've got a Variant Books, you've got the... Actually, did you pick up any Variant Books, or was that...
I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't.
Okay,
you picked them up, but I didn't.
Yeah, in my head, I picked them up. But you've got a few cheap interaction spells here with the Arcane Subtraction, the Heated Debate. If you were had none of that, yeah, you probably want the second interaction spell. But one of the things about 5-mana sorcery speed removal spells is in aggressive decks, they're pretty good. They're pretty okay because you cast all your creatures, you get their biggest thing out of the way, you deal them some damage, not bad. In a controlling deck, you often want your interaction to be cheap so you can get rid of the cheap creatures. You can cast it in response to, want it to be an instant, so you can cast it in response to a combat trick or blow out a combat or something like that, where this deck doesn't really appreciate the 5-mana removal spell as much. So yeah, I like the logic. Especially because you've already gotten there on playables. You're more than there on playables. If you were maybe lacking a few, probably take the spell, but I agree with the Archway Commons here. Alright, moving on. We did indeed take the campus. Yeah?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Take it, agree. And, ooh, Reckless on the
I was actually really surprised that wheeled and nobody took it, so I snagged it.
Yeah, so this draft is from, I am assuming, 2 or 3 days into the format?
Yeah, I can look up the exact date. But yeah, something like that. This was my second draft in the format. So
yeah,
fairly early.
I think even today, you'd be seeing a lot less of these summonings going around, right? You're lucky to have seen as many as you did, basically, and pick up as many as you did. But you almost have too many now because you don't have as many learn cards as you would like. You've got 4 or 5?
I don't know the number. I think that's high. We have Arcane Subtraction.
I
think that might be it, right? Because I didn't pick up the pop quizzes and all those other things.
Right, yeah. So we're actually pretty low on learn cards here. So, I definitely there's nothing else in the packet there for you. Some of the multiples, the duplicates of these lessons are probably going to go to waste, which is fine, But I guess that's just a point for the future that make sure you have a good balance of the lessons and the learns as you're going through the draft.
The last 3 picks were, I think, irrelevant.
Yeah, I think so too.
I did get the last pick, another campus though, which was nice.
Yeah, nice. All right, should we head on to the build?
Sure. I mean, I just real quick before we do the build, that might be one. Again, I said this in Kaldheim, that might be the lowest score ever, but that was a 24% mistake and a 37.8% mistake plus disagree.
Well, only one way to go from here, Nathan.
We're starting from the bottom here.
All right, so here we are in the build using, of course, our handy dandy 17lands.com. And we mentioned this at the end of the draft there. I didn't even take this in as we were going, but we've got 2 learn cards in our pile here, right? We've got the Enthusiastic Study, and we've got the Arcane Subtraction. Man, that is low, right? And I would have loved to have even just 4. I mean, 4 is maybe generous, but I would love to have 4 more. But even 2 more learn cards, right? Just to really fully make use of the sideboard here. And I think that is probably for me to you, my biggest takeaway for you from this draft is just I've hammered home how important the learn lesson cards is. But one of the important things is to balance. If you got a lot of lesson, you want some learn. If you want to got a lot of learn, you want some lesson. It doesn't have to be a perfect 1-to-1 ratio, but the more learn you have in your deck, the more you're going to be able to have access to all of these cards whenever you need them, right? It's actually a little bit better to have more learn and a little bit fewer lesson cards because, every learn card you draw will give you access to all these lesson cards, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas if you only have 2 learn cards in your deck, well, you only have 2 shots to get, whatever you want twice. And maybe not even twice in the game. Maybe even like once or 0 times, right? So if we look at this build here, a few issues I would say with it. So you decide to splash the Zimone. You didn't splash the Conjure Cultivator. I'm not saying that's wrong or not. I'm just saying that's the choice you made here. I would say, first things first, that you have enough card draw. You have enough, just like card advantage, card manipulation, that it's not actually worth all the tap lands to play Zimone here, right? I would actually be more interested in splashing Cultivator because what you're lacking is you've got all the card draw. What pairs best with card draw? Mana ramp, right? Because when you can ramp, you can cast more card draw, you can cast your bigger spells. You're not lacking this, what Zimone provides you. Now, she puts lands on the battlefield, I get it. If you're drawing a bunch of cards, that you can put more lands on the battlefield. But at the same time, a lot of your card advantage stuff with the 2 learn spells is not drawing lands, it's drawing spells, right? Same with Curate. That's card manipulation. You're not going to just be drawing a bunch of extra lands. So I'd be more interested in the Cultivator splash myself. Looking in the board here, I don't think there's really anything else I feel too strongly about. But overall, I would say that this deck could use a few more 2-drops, a good 2-drops. We already talked about this. The boots, I think, are a bit superfluous. Now, they get the Kelpie Guide and their 2/2s in, but I'm not super excited about that. I would probably just be trying to win by casting Masterpiece a few times, making some stuff unblockable here, getting it with the Muse, pillar dropping back your Masterpiece, maybe just accruing a bunch of card advantage with Will/Rowan, right? Those would be my ways to win. I don't think you really need the boots here. If you've got these big creatures down, they're probably going to do the job already. They don't really need flying. It would be my take.
I mean, judging based on what you said in the draft, you probably would want to leave the boots, cut that culmination of studies, and then bring in the Cultivator.
I think so. Yeah, and at that point, if I'm cutting this card and the culmination of studies, Zimone could probably stay, and you could probably keep the splash if you're bringing in the Cultivator. Basically, it's fine enough. I think Zimone is better than this card in culmination of studies, right? Kind of the lesser of 2 evils here. I think that'd be fine. So yeah, I would say this deck is lacking a bit of learn, lacking a little bit of top end. I think you would have liked one more top end spell, and lacking the actual impactful 2-drops. Because what's going to happen in this deck a lot of the time is sure, you'll play your Blaze General to block on turn 2, but it's just going to do stone nothing in the late game, which is pretty unfortunate. You'd really like that's why Prismari Pledge Mage is so good, because it blocks well early, and it can tussle later, getting it as a 3/3 instead of just a 2/2.
Sure.
Right? So, overall, if I'm to give this deck a score, I would give the Curve. Curve's actually pretty good. You actually did a pretty good job of doing, keeping track of that. So I give the Curve about a 9, right? Again, you'd like 1 or 2 more top end things here, but other than that, I like the Curve. As far as synergy goes, not a ton of synergy. Again, I think the lesson learned stuff plays into how the synergy grade of this deck. So I think it misses a bit there. I think I'd give you about a 5 out of 10 on that one. Again, with 1 more top end threat. And then as far as the mana base goes, it's actually not too bad. I think the Forest might be a bit superfluous, as you already have 3 sources here. Or what you could do is just play 2 Campuses and the Forest and no Archway Commons, because Commons is clunky in itself, right? It's a double tap land. So I think you could play double Quandrix Campus and the Forest. That'd be okay. The other thing to consider is you could go to 18 lands with all the card advantage stuff you have. I think without having a bunch of learn, I like the 17 lands, and having a pretty low curve, I do like the 17 lands, but it's something to consider. So mana base wise, pretty good. You also did a good job of picking up dual lands on a whim in the draft, where you're like, well, this could be relevant, and it was, right? So I think you did a good job there. So I would give the mana base probably about an 8. Yeah.
Great.
Overall,
yeah, I mean, looking at what you
yeah.
just said, we could cut the boots, cut the culmination of studies, add a land, and add the Cultivator, and it would probably be better, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Also, Cultivator like brawls pretty well too as a 3/4.
Yeah,
Right? That's
3/4,
pretty beefy. Yeah. Overall, I think the synergy grade, your synergy rating does bring this deck down quite a bit. I would say it's overall about a C level deck. It does have a Rowan, which is just like good on power level, so maybe I actually bump it up to C plus. I'll actually give you that for being able to pick that up. But overall, I think this deck might have a little bit of trouble just either sort of getting over the hump of turning the corner.
So, I mean, just trying to be harsher or realistic on myself in terms of synergy, you said repeatedly how important Learn was. The fact that I only have 2, is 5 a real score there, you think? Or if I'm shooting to get 5 or 6 Learns to have a good deck, I'm pretty below the bar on that. I didn't prioritize it. Do you think 5 is fair, or would you go even harsher?
Man, we always have this conversation every single week. So it's like I give you a score, and Nathan's like, but work me harder, Alex. Work me harder.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually on the other weeks I was like, no, Nathan, I think you actually deserve a score. But you actually bring up a valid point. How many times throughout that draft did I say, Nathan, lesson learned, so good, and you don't have quite enough? So you know what? I'll give you a 4. I'll give you a 4 on that. Yeah.
We'll go with a straight C. See, I don't want to get a plus just for opening a card.
Well, luck does play a part in it.
Yeah,
too,
it does.
So let's just take a quick look. You drafted another deck this week. We're not going to go through the draft, but I did want to take a look at it because I actually think it is a good example of a deck that looks like this. So here we are in this deck, and there's a few things that I'm not huge on. I think Augurar Battleseer is a pretty weak card. But you've got a great curve going on here. You've got the triple Pledge Mage, which is awesome. You've got, let's count your Learn lesson. You've got Pop Quiz, Arcane Subtraction, Dream Strix. I would want 1 or 2 more Learn cards ideally, but 3 is not bad. This lesson board, pretty solid, right? 3 is actually substantially more than 2, I would say. And the curve is great. You got a nice little tempo-y beatdown deck, solid Learn lesson package. This one went 5-3, just anecdotally, right? The other one went 0-3. I think this is like quite a better deck. And as a big picture thing for the format, Prismari can definitely be built different ways, right? That other Prismari deck was definitely a more controlling Prismari deck. But this one, it has some control elements where you're like, all right, kill your thing, filtering some, casting Curate, draw some cards, filter my draws. But you can definitely get a good beatdown of the Dream Strix, the Spectral Mages, the Quandrix Pledge Mage. Is that how your games played out, where you're more a bit more proactive?
Yeah, this deck was just so much better in terms of like having double Curate and was that Expressive Iteration there?
Yeah.
And Pop Quiz. I had a lot of instances for filtering. I have Opt, multiple choice there. The Tome Shredder got big off of that. The Serpentine Curve, we talked about it in the previous draft. This has so many instances, it just got beefy. And then I didn't really get run over because of the triple Pride Mage. So
right.
Yeah, this deck played out a lot better. I agree with you, having played with it now. The Augur Battleseer is not good. I wouldn't pick that again. I don't think. The Zephyr Boots here, I ended up using it quite a bit. The one thing I would flag for everybody is it's not a May, so I ended up having to pitch cards I didn't want to pitch, and so that was kind of a downside.
Yeah, I would say this deck overall just looks cleaner to me, right? It just looks like it's sleeker, it's slimmer. I would probably replace the Zephyr Boots with 17th Land, right? You've got the Opt in there, which is like can kind of count as a land if you're being optimistic about it. You can cast them turn 1 to kind of find your land, you cycle it. But I think just a clean 17 lands would be good for this deck.
Would you? Just scrolling down and looking at the sideboard, would you run? Memory Lapse or Prismari Pride Mage?
Oh, that's a great point. I actually didn't take a look at this. I think you could run I would run both the fourth Pride Mage here, Pledge Mage, but also Memory Lapse is quite a good card. Yeah,
is it? I really wasn't sure.
So remember all the nice things I said about Burian books, where you don't get rid of the thing for good, but you get rid of it for a few turns, and maybe that thing isn't as good on a later turn. That works with creatures, of course, but think about a combat trick, right? If you memory lapse a combat trick, it's like, oh, wow, I know now they know I have it. It's not going to be as effective. Maybe you lose the combat there, right? It's actually pretty good, and it's probably better than actual counterspell too.
It's good to know. Perfect.
Yeah. One last thing I would say is that I would probably bring in this aerialist too, instead of the Orgar Battleseer, right? I think that just like it's a nice little tempo card, plays well with the rest of your cards here. That's the other change I would make.
Perfect. I just learned today that Ward's going to be evergreen, huh? I didn't know that.
It's a forever thing now. At least until they decide it's not going to be.
Yeah, I don't know that I really like it, but that's fine.
yeah. It's not the most exciting mechanic, but all right, let's wrap it up from there, Nathan. I'll send it to you. What do you think some of your takeaways have been?
I think the biggest one is that I've learned in this this session is I need to really focus on this learn lesson mechanic. Looking at, I agree that this deck is more visually cleaner, but even just looking at the other deck, if you had not told me about the learn mechanic whatsoever, I thought it was going to be a pretty decent deck. Not like a 7-win deck, but definitely not an 0-3 deck. And so clearly something has fundamentally shifted in this format. And it's this lesson learned mechanic that I need to get up to speed on.
Totally. Yeah, obviously that's what I would say the biggest takeaway is too. All right. Well, Nathan, this is a blast. This was a blast as always. Good luck in your drafts in the coming week.
Yeah, good luck tomorrow in your showdown.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I think by the time this goes up, we'll know the results. And, I think we already know the results. I think Team Lords is going to come out ahead on this one. Pretty sure about that. But
well, I'm definitely rooting for you guys. So hopefully I can catch parts of it and watch you guys, steamroll them.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, Nathan. Viewers out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.